So let me start by saying hello, everyone, and I'm Anna from GreenGeeks, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, How to Get Started with Accessibility in WordPress, with our guest speaker, Amber Hinds, who's the CEO of Equalize Digital. So real quick, I want to say a couple of words for those of you who may be joining us and may not be familiar with GreenGeeks. We're a 300% green energy web hosting provider, which essentially means that we put back 3 times the amount of energy we consume into the grid in the form of renewable energy. We also have been recognized by the US EPA since 2009 as Green Power Partner, and we offer share hosting, reseller hosting, VPS, and dedicated server. Also, we plant a tree for every hosting account we provision, and we recently reached 50,000 trees planted through a partnership with a global reforestation company called One Tree Planted. So now, moving on to our webinar. So if you have any question that you come up with during the presentation, if you could put it in the Q&A, so Amber can be answering them at the end of her presentation. And you're always welcome to chat in the chat room. Don't forget to select everyone if you want everyone to see what you're discussing. We actually want this to be interactive and hear what you're thinking. And as always, we will be recording this. So if you have to step away, don't worry, since we will be sending a recording of this presentation to everyone in a couple of days. And then finally, we have enabled live transcription for the webinar, so you have the ability to enable them by clicking on the show captions icon during the webinar. Okay, so now I'm going to introduce first the GreenGeeks team who's here today, Erica Barbosa. She will be assisting us with the chat and the Q&A. And so welcome, Erica. Would you like to say hi?
Thank you, Anna. Hello, everyone. I am Erica Barbosa. I am from Costa Rica. I work in the partners team, and today I'm going to be assisting the chat. Hope enjoy today with Amber, and thank you for being here today.
Great, thank you. And now, Amber, I would like to say a few words to introduce you. Amber Hinds is the CEO, as I said earlier, of Equalize Digital, a mission-driven organization specializing in WordPress accessibility, maker of the Accessibility Checker plugin, lead organizer of the WordPress Accessibility Meetup, and board president of the WordPress Accessibility Day Conference, which is a lot. So through her, it's a lot. It's impressive. Through her work at Equalize Digital, Amber is striving to create a world where all people have equal access to information and tools on the internet, regardless of ability. Since 2010, she has led teams in building websites and web applications for nonprofits, K-12, and higher education institutions, government agencies, businesses of all sizes, and has become a passionate advocate for accessibility. So with that being said, welcome, Amber. Would you like to say hi and start sharing your screen and your presentation?
Yes, I am happy to do that. Thank you so much for having me. Let me make sure this can happen. And I'm going to do a quick test so we don't miss it later on, because I'm going to turn on for 1 second voiceover, and I want you to confirm that you can hear my computer sound also.
Voiceover on Brave, 2025 to 2009. How to get started with accessibility in WordPress. Google Slides, Brave. With
Could you hear that?
Slide 1 of 14. How to get started with accessibility in WordPress. Image. How to. 9 more. Voiceover off.
Yes, we could
We'll turn it off for now, but
I see
you could hear that as well.
Yeah, and also the I see some yeses in the chat room. So
okay, and you can see my presentation?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. So should I take it away?
Yes, take it away.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much for having me here, GreenGeeks, and everyone. I will tell you right now, I'm not super good at answering questions in the chat as I talk, but I will definitely save some time at the end for those questions. So I want to just start with a quick overview of what website accessibility is. I think sometimes people have this small concept of accessibility is about making websites work for blind people. And yes, website accessibility does make websites work for blind people, but it goes very far beyond that. So an accessible website, simply put, is one that can be used by everyone, people of all abilities and disabilities, using a variety of devices and assistive technology. So this could be someone who is blind who relies on a screen reader. This could be someone who has limb differences and maybe can't use a mouse but can use a keyboard, or they have mobility challenges and they rely on alternative keyboards or eye tracking, things like that. But it could also be people that we don't typically think of as disabled. So the elderly, someone who has low vision, maybe even like the image I have dead center in this grid of people, where we can see a mother holding her baby with a laptop and a book, and she's studying in a library. She would only have one hand to use her computer. So having an accessible website is really about ensuring that no matter what permanent or temporary situation someone finds themselves in, or whether they're on a computer with a mouse or a mobile phone or a screen reader or an alternative device, that they can access and use the website. So where do accessibility problems come from? The unfortunate reality is that accessibility problems on websites can come from many different directions. I have this illustration of Popeye, who was this old cartoon sailor. I don't even know, probably from our parents' generation. And he's holding his arms out to the side, trying to block water that is coming at him from both directions, because I think it is a really good illustration of what it a little bit feels like sometimes with accessibility in WordPress. Because in WordPress, you can have a lot of different things that could cause accessibility problems on the website. The first one, of course, is inaccessible branding, which means that those accessibility problems like color contrast issues or not readable fonts because of the font choices that were made, this could happen before the website is even built. And then we have sometimes accessibility problems comes from incorrectly entered content. Someone forgetting to put alternative text on an image, or not linking meaningful string, and they just link the word here. So all of this is just something that a content creator might do. And of course, in WordPress, there are many different sources of code. We get code from our theme, code from all of the plugins that we install on the websites, which sometimes can be a very, very large number. And then we can also have code that comes from third-party embeds, like needs to be thinking about how they can make accessibility part of their practices. So how do we measure accessibility? The most common and the standard way of measuring accessibility is against something called the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. These are internationally agreed upon testable standards created by volunteers in the World Wide Web Consortium, or the W3C. This is much like WordPress, where it's open source. Anyone can go get involved and participate in. There is actually a GitHub project where the web content accessibility guidelines are managed. You can go and contribute to discussion. You can help write these documentation. So it is worked on by a lot of people from all around the world collaboratively. This is also what is generally referenced by accessibility laws. So if you are in a location where you are legally required to have an accessible website, then laws are using web content accessibility guidelines as a measurement of whether or not you are meeting what the law requires. The current version of, I'm going to call it WCAG, just so you know, WCAG, WCAG is 2.2. This is what has most recently been released. Most laws came out before 2.2, and so they require a minimum of 2.1 conformance, so a slightly older version. I would say that to future-proof yourself and your websites, you want to try to strive for 2.2, whatever the current version of WCAG is, not just going to that older version that a law might reference. And then there are 3 different levels of conformance that are outlined in WCAG: A, AA, and AAA. A is basically the lowest level bare minimum, but it would not be considered sufficient to only meet the A guidelines. So the way WCAG is made up is there are a number of what we call success criteria. So these are testable things that you can look at some component on a website and say yes or no, it passes or it fails. There's no gray area. So the very first one, for example, is non-text content. So that image I had before, if I didn't have alternative text for it and it's providing important information, or maybe I have a linked image like a logo in my header that's linked to my homepage that doesn't have alternative text, that would fail that success criteria. Each of the success criteria have a different level of conformance. A is the basic. AA is a step up, like it's doing a little bit more than the bare minimum. This is what's considered best practice. This is what almost all laws require, is AA conformance. So that would mean you'd have to meet both the A and the AA success criteria. And this is what I would recommend targeting for. And then there are some success criteria that are considered like the highest level of accessibility. There are some criteria that have both a AA version and a AAA version, where the AAA version is more strict. An example of that is color contrast. The AA version allows for passing at a lower level of contrast. The AAA requires a higher level of contrast. So you can, if you meet AAA, you also meet the AA. But if you meet AA, you may or may not meet the AAA. Another example of a AAA is having sign language for videos. That would be considered going above and beyond to have a sign language interpretation, and that is a AAA criteria. Typically on websites, you might meet some AAA, but you might not meet them all. Sign language, for example, is one that maybe government always tries to do, but a business website is not likely to have sign language for every video with spoken audio. So how do you test for accessibility? How do you know, am I meeting these web content accessibility guidelines, and how does my website conform with the guidelines and then the laws that require accessibility? This is a multi-step process. I always recommend that you start with some sort of automated accessibility testing tool. We have a free plugin for WordPress called Accessibility Checker, which can do some of this scanning for you and provide reports. There's also a number of browser extensions that I'll demo and describe as well that are very useful in this. Why do we start with automated testing? Simply put, automated checks can find a lot of things that will be major issues. I have, for example, an image that doesn't have alternative text being flagged shown in the image on this screen. They can find things like links that don't have meaningful text, empty buttons, failing color contrast. All of these things can be somewhat reliably detected by an automated tool. And it is really, it's much easier to start with those things because some of them can be critical blockers, and then you don't have to spend time doing manual testing if you start there. But it is important to know that automated testing tools cannot find all problems. Some problems require human assessment. And so for that reason, it's not okay to only use automated tools. The next step then would be to do manual testing. And when you do manual testing, you want to test what I call a representative sample of pages. So if you think about every type of content that you have on your WordPress website, you have a home page, you have archives, and then individual posts for any post type that you might have. So for example, you have a blog page and then you have a single blog page where you can actually read a blog post. You have a portfolio page where you can see a whole bunch of different things that are in your portfolio, and then you can click through to them and go to an individual post that shows you that. So that's an example of an archive and a single. You would want to check that for every post type that you have. And then also think about any pages that have special features. And a lot of times I'll think about this in the case of like Does it have forms? Does it have key information? Does it have things that are interactive like accordions or tabs or things that we would expect people to be able to engage with to get all of the content on the page? Any of those are items that would need to be tested manually. And we test them first with our keyboard only, then we test them with a screen reader, and then we turn on reduced motion in our operating system and make sure that any sort of animations that are on the page are either completely gone or very significantly reduced, and that the website is appropriately responding when that setting is turned on in our operating system. And then we zoom the website to 200% and we look at it to make sure nothing's cut off or overlapping or requiring a ton of horizontal and vertical scroll on the same element. And then we do it again for 400%. So it's a lot of different steps, but that is kind of what you need to do in order to manually test a web page, which I'll demonstrate for you in just a minute. And then, of course, once you've done all of your testing, a good final step is to bring in a screen reader user or other people with disabilities, depending upon what the website is and who you think the audience might be. You might want to find people that use other forms of assistive technology, depending upon the audience, and have them test as well. I would say it makes the most sense to do that towards the end when you think the website is really accessible, because you don't want to waste a user's time or waste your own time, having them say, these images don't have alt text, these buttons don't have any sort of name, right? A lot of that you can figure out on your own using tools or manual testing techniques. And so what you really want to think about with people that are doing user testing is bringing them in to really finesse the experience. So I have linked in the slides and I did share the link. So I'm hoping maybe we can get the slides shared for everyone. There's a bunch of different resources that I'm going to show in just a minute here linked as well. There's a link over to Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. I also have a link to, this is a spreadsheet that we made that kind of has a more plain text explanation of what to look for each of those, because I do understand that WCAG can be a little bit dense for folks. Then the other reference that I really like if you're trying to learn about ARIA, which is the HTML attributes that screen readers use to announce states and different things, is the Mozilla developer docs. So I have that linked. And then I also have linked here, if anyone is interested, like what an example of an audit report sheet might look like if you were trying to do an audit for someone and report issues. And then I have linked some of the different browser extensions, which I will show you a few of these in just a minute that are super helpful. So let's go over, I'm actually going to leave my slides and we're going to take a look at an actual web page and talk about how you would test this for accessibility. This is, I'll be so transparent, this is a real website. It's not fake. This was our old website for our agency a long time ago. But it's been really useful for us because it has a lot of accessibility problems. And I want to highlight that this is real and this was my website because everybody starts somewhere. And I built this website with my team and we thought it was amazing and we thought it was really great. And then we learned and we realized, oh, we need to get better about how we're coding or creating certain things. And so if you first start testing your own website, you might find a lot of problems and it can feel stressful, but it does not have to be. And we'll talk in a minute about how you can prioritize fixes. But I'll show you, for example, on this website, I ran a full scan of this website, which has like 180 blog posts, and it's got team members and case studies and press release post types and an events calendar and just all kinds of things on it, right? And these are real marketing content that we were using to market. And I came back and I'm seeing like 183 images that Not that they have empty alternative text, but they don't even have the alternative text attribute at all. I've got links that don't have any sort of meaning. So this ambiguous anchor text, uh, a whole bunch, like hundreds of things, 773 insufficient color contrast, right? There's a lot of problems. But we could talk about in a minute, like how would we prioritize this? And I just want to say, like, it is so normal if you've never thought about accessibility to come across this. And I don't want it to overwhelm you because you can fix it and you can make it better. So we're going to look at just this We're a Certified B Corp page. And I'm going to show you it's got a paragraph, it's got a video on it, and some different sections with like an image and text. Down here we have some accordions, some more images, which actually open up in a light box, a learn more link, and then our footer down here. So with accessibility checker free, if I was using this to do my automated tests, there are two ways I can look at it. I can actually look at it on the back end and it'll give me a report. And if I go over to the details, I could see things like, oh, there's 4 headings that have an incorrect heading order. We're proud to be making the world a better place through social and environmental sustainability. I can actually view this on the page if I want. We'll see how quickly it opens. So this right here got flagged because we have an H1 up here. We're a Certified B Corp. That's the page title. And then we have this text, which is really just a subtitle. It's not a heading, tagged as a heading 3. So it's skipping a heading level. Now I know now that this is just a sentence that should be large, styled large, like a paragraph with larger font because we wanted it to stand out. It's not actually a heading, right? There's no sub-content. So this would be an example of something where I would say, okay, I need to fix this. So what I would first do on this page is I would, check all of the automated issues. I could either move through, the tool on the front end and sort of see there's all my incorrect headings. This is when it's saying it might be a heading and I'm actually saying, nope, that's probably fine. So I could go in the back end if I wanted and find that where's that possible heading in my footer. Be like, no, this is not a heading. And ignore that, then I'll remove it from my reports. So I would go through and I would try to first test all of this with these automated tools. You can use Accessibility Checker. There are a couple of really handy browser extensions. So one is Headings Map. I love this extension because it just gives me a really quick view, similar to what we saw. So it's showing us the same headings that got flagged by Accessibility Checker, but it also helps me figure out, do I actually have these structurally in the right thing? So for example, Accessibility Checker and even this headings map, it doesn't flag that this phone number is a heading 2. But actually, what I can tell just by looking at this, well, that doesn't make sense as a heading. Like that's really just text that's large again. So I probably should go fix that. And then I need to fix my whole footer that's going on down here because these shouldn't be heading 4s, right? So this is a really handy browser extension. Another one that I really like when I'm doing automated testing is this. It's called Landmark Navigation. And this is really helpful because it shows you all of the HTML landmark regions on the page. So the banner, that's my header. That's good. I have that. I do see 2 things that jump out at me. Navigation, that's probably down here somewhere. Navigation, so in the footer also. Well, here's a problem. These don't have unique names. How would someone know which one was the primary navigation, right? So this is really helpful. It can allow me to find and do that. So I'll take a whole pass through this page with some of these automated tools and I'll start noting down, okay, what are things that we need to fix? And then frequently I might fix those items before I circle back to doing manual testing. Maybe not. If you're someone who's just auditing and then you have to hand over to a developer, you might continue doing manual testing. So when I do manual testing, what that looks like is, first of all, I'm going to start at the top of the page and I'm going to hit the tab key. So if I hit tab, let's see, this is an interesting thing. I don't have something called a skip to content link. So that right there is an issue. There's no way for screen reader user or a keyboard only user to bypass this navigation. Now on this website, it's not a huge deal because there's not drop downs. It is still a failure, but it's not as horrible as it might be as if they had to tab through many, many, many drop downs, right? But you can see that's missing, and I'll just tab and I'll make sure, can I get to everything? And can I tell where I am? So do I have a visible outline? So right now it's blue. I can barely see that, but it's on the YouTube video. Now I'm down below. So right now I'm thinking, okay, my focus outline looks pretty good. Here I've encountered some accordions. So I want to know, can I open them? Accordions should be able, they should underlying have the structure of a button. So you should be able to open them with the return key. There's my return key and the space bar. There's my space bar. So I think, okay, these look pretty good. I'm going to keep going. Now I'm on my images. It's not as clear with the focus indicator. I'll note the pink focus outline, that's my operating system settings. This is going to look a little different for people. In an ideal world, you don't want the website to define the color. You want it to be set by the operating system settings. But I'm going to click on one of these images here. I'll use my space bar because I'm thinking this should be a button. Oop, that didn't work. Okay. So now I'm going to see, well, can I open it with my return key? Oh, yep, there we go. That's me. This is how old this website is. There's me pregnant with one of my daughters a long time ago. So a light box opened, but I can't really tell where I am. And I hit tab then, shift tab. So for some reason, tabbing is taking me to the next image, which is a little odd because what I expected to do is go from this close button to the previous button to the next button. I'm not really sure why those can't get keyboard focused. Sometimes I'll look at things and I'll say, why is this not doing it? I don't know. It's a link. So that right there is a little weird because a link goes somewhere, like to another page or further down on the page, or if you're at the bottom, back up to the top of the page. A button triggers an action like opening and closing accordions, moving visible content in a carousel, which is sort of what this lightbox is, right? So this seems a little problematic. What's also a little weird is I can't figure out, because I can't get, for whatever reason, to this close button, I can't figure out how to close it visually with my keyboard. I could try the escape key. That does work. And it did. This is good. It put my focus back on where I was. So it didn't send me off somewhere weird. So that part is good. But again, this is a little bit problematic because there were visual buttons that I could see that weren't there. Now I'm on my Learn More link, which obviously needs to be read out differently and down in the footer. So I would kind of do this, trying to make sure, can I get to everything? And I'll even show you another example on where is that? On the home page of this website, something that would flag for me. So I've got these drop downs. I can choose something. Oh, where am I? Look at this. Now I have no idea where I am, right? There's this go button right here, and I couldn't tab to it. Why not? Because it's a div with a class of button. It's been fake made into a button with JavaScript. So as I said, we all start somewhere. So this is kind of what you're doing when you're doing keyboard testing. You're trying to figure out, can I get to everything? Can I tell where I am? Does it follow a meaningful order? All of that sort of stuff. So once I've done that, then what I do is, we'll go back to the Certified B Corp, and I will turn on my screen reader. I'm on a Mac, so I'm going to be turning on VoiceOver for you all. You heard a tiny little bit of it before, and you'll get to hear more of it in just a minute. This is built in to Macs. If you are on a Windows computer, the screen reader that you would want to use is called NVDA, which stands for Non-Visual Desktop Access. That is a free open source screen reader. You can go to nvaccess.org and download it and install it on your computer for free. So I'm going to turn this on.
Voiceover on Brave. We are a certified B Corp. Road Warrior Creative. Brave. Window.
All right, I've stopped it from speaking. I'm going to try not to speak over the screen reader. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into the page, and I would do the same sort of thing. I usually like to let it read the whole page to me because then I can watch and I can catch kind of like weird things. But I don't know if we'll have time to do that today. So I'm going to maybe go to a specific element, but let me go into the page.
Visited, link, image, Road Warrior Creative logo, banner. Road Warrior Creative. You are currently on a link.
All right, so I'm going to flag something for you right there. When I got to this image, it told me link, that's good. Road Warrior Creative logo. Okay, well, that is something that unless I was inspecting the code, I might not have realized that the alternative text on this says that it's a logo. If this was only an image, that would be fine. But because this is actually a link going somewhere to the home page, ostensibly, that is a problem because what it didn't do was it didn't communicate to me the purpose of the image. This is an interesting thing about alternative text. You want to describe an image until it becomes a functional image that does something. And the moment it becomes a functional image that does something, an image that's in a link, an image that's on a button, you no longer want to describe visually what it is. You want to describe what it does. So the proper alternative text on this is not Road Warrior Creative logo, it's Road Warrior Creative homepage, because that's how I know that when I click this link, that's where I would go. And this is one of the things where turning on a screen reader is really helpful because yes, you could inspect the code, but if you just go through it with a screen reader, then it's usually a lot faster than inspecting the code and you'll be able to catch little things like that. Let me just tab
Link,
through.
culture, list 6 items, zoom us, zoom share toolbar window, system dialog, mute my audio, audio submenu. To click this button, stop video button, group. Quick zoom us, zoom share, heading level link, photo image of B Corporation, link, share, play, but link, watch on YouTube, link, Road Warrior Creative Governance, group. You are currently on a group.
All right, so this is another thing that I want to highlight. These are the accordions that we saw before. And when I was just doing keyboard testing without turning on my screen reader, I thought these seem like they work great because they opened and closed with both the spacebar and the return key, which is what I would expect when it was a button. But right now you can hear, and I'll go to the next one, that it's going to tell me it's just a group.
Workers, group. You are currently on a group.
Okay, so all it did was tell me it was a group. It didn't say that it was anything functional, like button. It also didn't tell me that it is collapsed. And normally when I want things like this to go, I would be able to hear expanded collapsed when I engage with this. And I'm highlighting this for you all because it really shows how important it is to do screen reader testing and not just rely on doing kind of like manual testing with your keyboard. Let me turn this off for a second. Because there are things that unless you deeply understand the code, you might not be able to tell the problem. So when I look at these particular accordions, why is this a problem? Because we have the control is just a div. They've probably they've given it a tab index with the 0. They have it referencing the panel. There's a heading, that's good. But what they've done wrong is, of course, it's not a button. They haven't given it a button role, so it doesn't announce as a button, even though it functions as one. And then the other thing is they've incorrectly put ARIA expanded on this toggle panel when it actually needs to be on the element that controls it, which is what tells me something is expanded or collapsed. So it is really important to turn on your screen reader and listen to these things as you interact with them. And then you start to learn, okay, would I know if I couldn't see this that I could expand this group? And the answer is no, right? And so that's where you can start to figure out that there's some problems. I'm happy to answer more questions later about screen reader testing, but I'm going to move on now just because it takes a lot of time. There's no animation, but I would turn on the reduce motion. And what that looks like, just so everyone is aware, is on a Mac, and you can do this on a PC as well, but I would go to accessibility display, and then I would turn on this. I actually have it on by default, but reduce motion right there. And if there were a carousel autoplaying, for example, then I would just see once I turn this on, you shouldn't even have to refresh the page. It should just immediately stop. But if it doesn't, when you have that turned on, then that is an issue. And then the next thing that I would do, I mentioned, is I just zoom in. So I go to 200%. And we have a little weirdness just because the admin bar does janky things. Don't worry about that. Sometimes, test that logged out, then you won't have the admin bar. But what I want to make sure is nothing cut off. In particular, I'm probably on Zoom going to watch this header section here where we've got what looks like a fixed height and some very large text. Right now, everything looks generally okay at 200%. These all still work. Looking at these, it fits in the space. So I'm like, okay, 200% looks good. So now let's go up to 400%. Well, this is a little weird. I don't know why, maybe just my admin bar, but that's sticky. I would also say, oh, this is when I need to test my mobile menu. I've hit tabbed. I can't see my focus. I'm expecting my focus to be on this button to trigger the menu. Is it? Spacebar didn't work. Return key didn't work, which tells me, I bet you, oh, look, I was focused inside the menu somewhere. This is super weird, right? So this clearly is a definite fail for accessibility because I can't get into this menu, which is a div and not a button. That's why, because divs are not keyboard focusable. So the whole nav menu doesn't work for people who are low vision. Also, whatever we have going on here with our sticky header is problematic. I would probably just not make the menu or the whole header sticky on this level of zoom or mobile. Or I would potentially say that whenever you go down, it hides, but then the moment you scroll up, it becomes visible. And so that would allow people to not have to scroll all the way to the top of the page. But this is what I talk about when I say you want to test it on Zoom. So we've done all of that testing. What do we do now when we have all these huge number of problems? Where do I start? So first of all, I would identify priorities. And I prioritize things by first looking at global elements. Then I look at anything that is a critical blocker, pages where conversions happen, and then fourth, any high traffic pages. So global elements is header, footer, sidebars, things like that. Number one, the first thing I would fix is everything in my header. I would make sure that my mobile navigation is fully keyboard accessible. I would deal with that weird overlap that I have. I would change the logo alt text, which again, that's a 2-second fix, right? To say that it goes to the home page. So all of that first. That's going to allow people to actually navigate my website. So that's really important. Then critical blockers, these are things that in our example that we have here from Accessibility Checker, we have a severity of critical. So images that are missing alternative text, that doesn't mean it's been left empty, but the alt attribute is literally not present. Any sort of links that aren't meaningful, so just the word learn more, click here, download what, right? If you don't know what it's going to do without referencing text around it, then that is a problem, and it might stop people from being able to follow or understand that link. We want to look at videos. Why is that critical? Because of people who are hard of hearing or deaf. At a bare minimum, all of our videos need to have captions. They should also have transcripts, and you also want to look at them if you have text on your videos for color contrast. Make sure there's no rapid flashing. This is critical because rapid flashing can trigger seizures for some people. And the last thing you want is for your website to cause someone to have a seizure. Empty links, empty buttons, sliders, making sure that those all work. So all of these things are things that could critically stop someone from using the website. So do those first. And then you might go down through high or medium. But when you get to some point with some of these like higher medium, this is where you might start picking and choosing what pages to work on first. And so when I say pages where conversion happens, I think about the bottom of your funnel moving up. So things like do your checkout page before you do your cart page, before you do your product single. Or your product search before the product single, right? Thinking about where is that user journey and start at the bottom Anytime there's a form, if it's a form page, make sure your forms work. That's like one of the most critical things in order for your website to do what it's supposed to do. So do that first. And then I would go look at Google Analytics and hit on the pages that get the most traffic or that are really key in the user journey and do those as a priority. And then you just figure out, okay, these are the things I'm going to do. How many hours can I spend? Looks like I have a little typo on my slides, but how many hours can I spend weekly or monthly? And then just start rolling out fixes over time. I might look at something, like that header. Can I get my header fixed in a month? And that would be a really great goal. And I know that would make a significant difference on my website. It won't necessarily make it perfect, but that would really help people in being able to navigate and use my website, which if they can't navigate, they're just going to bounce. So think about it that way. And then there are also some things you can do that are quick wins. So our accessibility checker plugin includes automated fixes that you can turn on. So one of them, for example, on that website was we didn't have a skip link. So I could go into my theme code and I could code in a skip link. And maybe that is the best way to approach that. But if I don't know how to do that, I'm not a developer or I have developers on my team, but they're really busy working on something else. I could go turn on this in Accessibility Checker. It would add that skip link and solve that problem for me. Another thing is on this particular website, we didn't have an issue with focus outlines, but if you're hitting that tab key and you don't see an outline around each element, then adding a focus outline to all focusable elements. Again, you could do that with CSS. You could also go turn that on in Accessibility Checker if you're not sure how to do that. Another thing that is really handy with Accessibility Checker is we have a fix that will turn on warnings on any time a link goes to a new window. It adds a visual and an auditory warning. That is a requirement for not changing context on input for WCAG. And under that same sort of idea, there's a fix that allows you to turn on a warning when you're linking to a non-HTML file. So like a PDF or something that might trigger a download for a user, it will automatically go through your whole website and add text to all those links and say something like PDF, 5 megabytes or whatever the size is. So that people are aware that if they click that link, now they're going to get a PDF and this is how big it might be. And then another thing too is adjusting your color palette. That's something on that particular website. Our greens were pretty problematic. I also have an example here. We have this contrast grid tool, which is really handy. Right now I have all of the different things turned on as far as whether it passes or not. I'm going to turn off does not pass and AA18, which means it only works for large text. And in this particular color palette, which has white, it's called dark gray. I think it's more of a medium gray, a bright blue, a dark blue, a green, and an orange. You can actually see that almost none of these colors work. And so this would require me to come in and say, okay, I need to do something about this to make it work. Like if that bright blue is really important to me, I've been using it with white that doesn't pass color contrast. So maybe I need to introduce a darker color so that I could use it. So maybe I add a 333, which is an even darker gray, right? And now I can say, okay, well, that works for my orange, didn't quite get enough for my blue. Let's just go, I don't know, 111. That got it. So that got us something that would work with our blue, right? So thinking about your color palette is really important and probably something you want to do early on because color contrast, it impacts people with low vision. It also can be really problematic for people who are using cell phones outside on a sunny day. So I have a couple of these tools linked in this slide, and I would say like spending time working on your color palette, that can clear up a lot of automated issues pretty quickly. And then some things in content that are worth highlighting as best practices. You want to make sure you add headings in proper order. Headings are the way a lot of screen reader users in particular will navigate and understand content of the page. Make sure you're writing meaningful link text. Add alternative text to images if they have important information. Make sure that you're formatting content in lists as much as possible, putting tabular data in tables with headers. By default, the WordPress table block has the headings turned off. Turn it on, add headings, or use a more complicated table plugin that will allow you to have row headers as well. You want to provide captions and transcripts for both video and audio. Make sure you're targeting an appropriate reading level. And as much as possible, I try and tell all of our clients to avoid PDFs. PDFs are for print. They are super annoying to look at on mobile because they don't resize. They can be made accessible, but they're much more difficult to be made accessible. And what is important to note is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines and accessibility laws require that any content on the web be made accessible. It's not just your HTML web pages. If you are putting out PDFs, then those also fall under the laws. So the easiest thing is to say, can this PDF be a web page? And if the answer is yes, that's what I would always do. If it absolutely has to be a PDF, then it needs to be remediated. I have a link in here to our Shift Left with accessibility checklist just because I don't have enough time to talk through everything that you would do at every phase of like a new website build project. But I would recommend getting the link for this. It's actually a Google Doc, so you can then like edit it, modify it, copy it, put it wherever you want. But that will give you a lot more information beyond just the few things we've touched on here today. What I want to highlight is that accessibility is a journey. It's not a destination. It's not a one-time, one and done. Just like SEO or security is not something that you do one time and then you say, okay, I'm done now, right? Like think about this as something, what is a small thing that I can do each week, each day, each month, whatever makes sense for you, and do it over time. Obviously, you want to go as fast as you can. You should prioritize accessibility, but you do that. And then at some point, when you get your website to a really good place, you're still going to need to continue monitoring it, particularly because as we mentioned, like in WordPress, a lot of problems can come out of plugins, like that accordion that we looked at, that was a plugin. And maybe something's good, but if I run updates on my plugins, well, now new problems could be introduced on my website. So you want to make sure that you're monitoring and checking in on it on a regular basis. This is my information. I'm happy to answer any questions that people have right now. And if you think of any later, you can always reach me at amber@equalizedigital.com, or I'm at Hey Amber Hinds on X, or on LinkedIn. You can find me as well. What questions can I answer?
I see some questions in the Q&A.
Should I stop sharing?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
So we have Doug asking, Andy tool is another good one used in trusted tester system. I guess it refers to something we were talking about earlier.
Yes, the Andy tool is one that's referenced. The trusted tester is the US Section 508 has a trusted tester certification and program that they teach for testing. The one thing that I would caution a little bit about Andy is I don't know that it's up to the current version of WCAG, and trusted tester as well is typically focused on 2.0, which is an older version of WCAG.
Okay. Pamela is asking, can you suggest accessibility tools for the Safari browser?
I would check and see if those the makers of those extensions also make them for Safari, but I'm going to say, to be totally honest, I am not as familiar with Safari because while I'm on a Mac, I hate Safari and I never use it. I will note that if you want to test tab navigation, that is off by default in Safari. So you need to go in your Safari settings and actually turn on the ability to tab to interactive controls. I would also encourage you, even if Safari is your preferred browser for daily driving, you should probably also be testing in Chrome, because when we look at screen reader user surveys and they say like what devices they most commonly use on what browsers, Safari is used on iOS, like mobile, iPhone, I guess, so not iOS, but like iPhone. But most screen reader users are using Chrome of all the browsers. So you want to make sure you're testing where they are.
Yeah. Let's see, Elsie, is this only for bigger businesses? How would small businesses afford to put all this extra work into building their website?
I think that's a great question. The first thing I would say is that initially, there's a lot you can do if you're choosing your tools carefully. So, if you're trying to assess out of the box plugins, like I happened to show that one, which was not great, but there are free accordion plugins on WordPress.org that are fully accessible, and that work fine for screen readers. So I would read their documentation, submit a support request, and ask them, because a lot of it is just choosing the right tools can be really helpful to keeping it cost effective. Uh, Ask them if they have an accessibility conformance report. That's the best way. If they don't, then I would just ask them a bunch of questions like, how do you test for accessibility? How do you make sure that your updates aren't adding accessibility problems? Have you ever had an external accessibility professional test your plugin? Those sorts of questions. Um, and then the other thing I would say for like agencies or web developers is if you put some time into testing whatever your starter is, so whatever theme or like plugin stack that you use when you build websites, and make some fixes there, then you don't, in theory, you don't ever need to do those same fixes over and over again on new website projects. So it's a little bit of an investment in making sure you have a good starter, but then it makes it less expensive for ongoing projects because you're starting from a better place. And then if you have an existing website that needs to be remediated, again, you can spread this stuff out over time. And so you could think of it as like part of your maintenance plan. Like maybe you only have a developer spend 2 or 3 hours a month helping to fix some things, but you can still fix a lot of problems, including some very major ones in that small amount of time.
Okay, great. Marty's asking, why do many emails I receive use minuscule types, very small type? These are typically constant contact type of emails. They're eligible on a mobile. Why?
I do not know the answer to
No,
that
no,
because I
no.
don't know much about email, so unfortunately I can't answer that one.
Okay,
Sorry.
thank you. Doug is asking, what do you do to check WP plugins to see about the accessibility of the actual plugin?
So I would do the same thing. If they have a demo, there is a browser extension linked in the slides called Wave, WAVE, and you could use that on their demo site, and that might tell you some things. You have to be a little careful because, and this depends again on your skill level. So a demo website might have color contrast problems, and that might not stop me from using that plugin because I know that if I put that plugin on my website, I can change the colors and I know how to fix them. So I don't care if that plugin developer put the right. So you have to know like what is your skill set, or would you be able to fix that? But that browser extension is really useful to use. You can also do the same technique with the keyboard navigation. Like, can you tab through this on their demo? If they don't have a demo, then again, I would reach out. I would ask them those questions that we already talked about. You might just have to install it on like a staging or a test environment in your GreenGeeks hosting, and then try it out there. And I would always say, if you're going to try a new plugin, it's most ideal to not put it on your live website. Put it somewhere else, try it, test it out. Uh, and then if you come up with issues, I try to submit a support request first to the developer. Unless it's just so bad, then you might just abandon and try a different one.
Okay, fair enough. Let's see. Ryan is asking, what are some disabilities we should be considering that often get overlooked? How do we determine which disabilities to consider when testing? It seems like most accessibility testing centers around keyboard, navigation, and screen readers.
So I would say one that commonly gets overlooked is people who rely on speech control. So for example, Dragon Speech is an assistive technology that allows people to use their voice to trigger a website. Uh, Something that I would look for that is maybe an overlooked success criterion in WCAG is label in name, which basically says any visible text needs to be in the accessible name. So if you have learn more as the visible text on the button that we saw, and if I added an ARIA label that just said about us, so that for screen readers, the link said link about us, that would actually be a fail because a person who's trying to target that with speech is going to say, click the learn more button. So a fix for that would be the ARIA label has to include the learn more at the, so whatever the visible text is has to be at the beginning. So it would, instead of saying link about us, it would have to say link learn more about us. So that's one thing that I think a lot of people overlook. Another one that is actually very common and people don't realize as much is color blindness. A lot of men in particular, I think I've read like over 30% of men have some degree of color blindness to red and green. And so making sure when you are using colors that you're not relying on colors alone to denote information or functionality. This is why we require an underline on links and that you can't just have your links be a different color. They need to have the underline. But also if you're creating charts or graphs, you don't want to have a pie chart where it's like green and red. That would just look like a circle to these people. So maybe you have a pie chart where it's green and red, but the red is striped and the green is solid. So it looks different. So thinking about color blindness, I'm trying to think. The auditory issues are primarily going to be the needing to have captions and transcripts. Transcripts, the reason why you need transcripts for videos and not just captions is for deaf-blind people. Deaf-blind people can't access captions on videos, so the only way they could access the video content is in a transcript. So that's another group that maybe people don't think about as much, is thinking about people who are then getting it in, typically they're getting it in a refreshable Braille display and they're reading the Braille rather than hearing a screen reader because they're also deaf and blind.
Yeah, wow. Let's see. Brian is asking also suggestions for improving accessibility for those with color vision deficiencies.
Yeah, so I mentioned like making sure that you're distinguishing between colors. Higher contrast is really good. Um, so making sure if you can, we always try as much as possible. Can we target AAA color contrast, at least for like the body text? And then maybe we have slightly lower contrast on very large headings. But that would be something to think about, making sure that you're not having like the really light gray on a white background for your paragraphs. I think another thing too, oh, this is another interesting thing. If you're putting together reports, you might see this where we tend to think of green is good and red is bad. But if you just had like a green dot and a red dot, again, someone who's colorblind can't do it. So this is where I think of, could it be a green circle and a red square? Like thinking about integrating shapes or that sort of thing. Another thing as well is don't use color as a descriptor. So you wouldn't want to say something like click the green button or position also, click the button to the right, because what does the right mean on mobile or in a screen reader where everything is in a DOM, like in order? So you'd want to actually say, click the button that says download here, right? Or whatever. That's not a great button text, but something that clearly distinguished with the text, not like the characteristics of the button.
Okay. Alex is asking, have you tried the Elementor Ally Accessibility plugin and would you recommend it?
So I have tried it and reviewed it. I generally don't recommend it. I think Elementor is great and they are doing a lot of things to try and improve accessibility. I think there's some interesting stuff that they're doing on the accessibility, like finding issues and helping people figure out how to fix them. But I generally don't ever recommend adding a toolbar to the website. I would recommend that people go to, there's a website called overlayfactsheet.com, which has a lot of information about those kind of toolbars and website accessibility overlays, which is not quite what the Ally plugin is, but it's similar. And the situation is most of the tools that those toolbars provide, screen reader users or keyboard users or low vision users already have those. So if someone needs a website zoomed in, they either have their default zoom level on their browser set that way permanently, or they have like a screen magnifier that runs on their operating system that magnifies their entire operating system, right? And so it is much better to support, like code websites in a way that supports the tools people already use instead of making them try to learn a new tool when they get on your website.
Yeah.
And the other thing I'll say too about those things as well, and just accessibility in general, is accessibility is very much about having a really strong underlying HTML structure. And that underlying structure is very helpful for search engine optimization because now search engines who are blind understand what the website is. And the biggest downside of any of those toolbars or overlays is, maybe they do for a particular user recognize, oh, they're using a screen reader, so I'm going to add alt text to images. But by default, those images don't have alt text, which means search engines can't understand what they're about. So like those tools don't provide any of the extra benefits that fixing the underlying content on your website does for bringing people to the website and helping it rank better in search.
Yeah. I have a couple of more questions for you, if you have a couple of minutes that were
I
submitted
do.
by Doris, who couldn't attend this webinar, but asked if we could read them to you.
Okay.
So they're not going to be in the Q&A. What consideration is being done to make the backend more accessible to low vision users? It is accessible to screen readers, but not easy for someone with low but usable vision. So
In
what
WordPress core itself. So I will say the accessibility team, like many of the teams, relies on volunteers. I just last weekend opened a number of accessibility issues. Not all of them were necessarily low vision specific, but my team has been doing some testing in the admin, um, including like Zoomed testing. So I know that some of that is done. There is only one person I know of right now. His name is Joe Dolson, who is fixing problems related to like the classic editor or some of the older, more legacy screens. So anyone who is a developer who wants to help fix those problems would definitely be welcome on the WordPress accessibility team. I do know there's ongoing efforts to try and make Gutenberg and the block editor more accessible. There are several hundred issues open for that right now. Um, so what I would say, to Doris or anyone else is if you come across a specific problem, the best thing to do is if you can open either a GitHub issue for Gutenberg or a track ticket, then someone on the team can look at it. And then at least we can try and get fixed. There is efforts to try and do this and improve that. I also know that right now there are conversations happening about totally redesigning the WordPress admin. And there are like some Figma designs that are out there that people can provide feedback on. So potentially, if anyone is willing to give feedback on that, that would be really helpful to get ahead of when it gets built to say, going and saying, hey, from a low vision perspective, this might be a problem. I hope that answers her question sufficiently.
Yeah. She also, Doris was also asking, is there any flexibility in making the text a little larger to begin with on the templates without making the format go wonky?
If that's in the admin,
Um,
I mean, the thing I would say, what gets difficult about the admin, let's see. So there's no setting that I know of that would just say default, make everything in the admin large, like for my user account. That is an interesting feature, and I can definitely open a track ticket and see if anyone is interested in adding that. I do know that on an individual edit screen or like the dashboard or a settings screen, it may be possible in core without too much problem because things stack pretty well. what gets a little bit more difficult is like on the post page where you have a table and you have lots of columns. There is an option in screen options where you could uncheck columns. You might have to do that. I know sometimes if I zoom in, I have to go turn off some of the columns that some of my plugins are adding, like my SEO plugin and stuff, because otherwise it makes it too hard to read because there's just not enough space for everything. So I think there are ways to work around that and have larger text, but it might mean losing some information in the quick views without actually clicking into an item.
Yeah. Okay. Well, she's not here to. So the last thing she said, Doris again, this is just a point of information. 8 out of 9 people who are legally blind or vision impaired have some usable vision, yet all the accessibility work on websites is making it accessible for screen readers. Many people still appreciate reading and seeing a good visual accessible website. It's more of a comment.
Yeah, I'm really sorry that she feels that way. And I think I saw someone else say something similar, like they feel like it only targets screen reader users. I'll say that with our work at Equalize Digital, we do a lot that is specifically, like I mentioned, we zoom in, we check it at 200%, we check it at 400%. Another thing, when we have like a tooltip, one of the things that we'll check for that is specifically targeted to low vision users is it possible to move your mouse off of the thing that made the tooltip appear and onto the tooltip itself? And the reason why this is important is because if someone is using a screen magnifier that just magnifies the area around their pointer, they would need to do that to make the tooltip enlarge. So we do a lot to try and focus on that. I know that my friend Joe, who I mentioned from the accessibility team, he thinks a lot about low vision as well. But I can totally understand, and I'm not trying to invalidate her feelings that she feels like it doesn't do that. My hope is that we can continue to get better so that people won't feel like low vision is left out.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think that I don't see any other questions, and we're going to include, if you don't mind, your links, the many links you gave, and to in the recap when we send the recap, the video, to help out, for whoever is watching it. And yeah, that's it for everybody. Thank you so much for attending. Keep looking for new webinars at greengeeks.com/webinars. And thank you to both of you, of course, Erica, for your help. And of course, Amber, you're always great. And we hope you can come again in another webinar. It's been great.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Great topic too. Thank you so much. And we'll see everybody next time.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank
Thank you.
you. Bye,
Bye, everyone.
everyone. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.